Do you even belong here? The words didn't just land. They detonated like a bomb in the middle of a live broadcast. The studio froze. The cameras, still rolling, caught every flicker of disbelief on the faces of those watching. Millions of viewers across America stared at their screens, jaws clenched, eyes widening as the question reverberated through the air. It wasn't a slip of the tongue. It wasn't a joke. It was a calculated dagger aimed not just at one person, but at an entire identity, a whole community that had fought tooth and nail to belong to this country they proudly call home. On one side of the debate stage, the villain smirked, leaning forward like a predator savoring the moment. His voice oozed arrogance, dripping with the kind of entitlement that reeks of power unchecked for too long. He didn't just challenge his opponent's argument. He questioned their right to exist in the very space they had earned. And in that single, searing moment, something shifted. It wasn't just a debate anymore. It was war for dignity, for the soul of the American promise. Phones buzzed. Screenshots of the exchange began flooding social media in real time. Hashtags exploded within minutes. Belonging matters, know your place, and a third one that would soon dominate every trending list. Do you even belong? In living rooms and offices, from New York skyscrapers to small-town diners, people were taking sides. Some cheered the audacity. Others felt their blood boil, their identities insulted, their sacrifices mocked. And through it all, the camera stayed on the hero, the calm before the storm. No outburst, no rushed defense, just a steady gaze locked on the man who had dared to throw the first punch. The air felt electric, every viewer sensed it. Something historic was about to unfold, not just a clapback, not just a rebuttal, but a reckoning. Because in that studio, under those blinding lights, this was no longer about politics. It was about belonging, about the unspoken question that millions have faced in silence. Am I enough? Do I deserve to be here? The villain thought he had the upper hand. He thought those words would break her. But this was only the beginning. What happened next would leave millions stunned. America has seen its share of heated debates, but this moment felt different. It wasn't just another televised sparring match. It was a litmus test for the values this nation claims to stand for: freedom, equality, dignity for all. And in that instant, when those 5 venom-laced words sliced through the air, "Do you even belong here?" It was as if someone had ripped the curtain away and exposed the raw, unfiltered truth. This wasn't a gaffe. It wasn't passion running high. It was deliberate. A message loud and clear from someone who believed that power equals ownership, that leadership in America is reserved for a select few. And if those few had their way, entire communities would always be reminded, "You're a guest here. Never forget that." That's why this moment matters. Because what's at stake isn't a single debate. It's the question of who gets to call themselves American without an asterisk, without the whispered doubts, without the constant need to prove their worth. For millions watching at home, it didn't feel like policy anymore. It felt like a personal attack on their families, their histories, their dreams stitched into the very fabric of this country. For the immigrant who worked double shifts to give their child a shot at college. For the second-generation kid who still gets asked, "But where are you really from?" For every voter who believes that America's promise is bigger than a zip code, a skin tone, or a last name. This was the moment that promise was being mocked. And here's the terrifying truth. If the villain wins, that mockery becomes precedent. That idea, that belonging is conditional, seeps deeper into the system. Suddenly, school kids hear it and think it's okay. Employers hear it and feel emboldened. Lawmakers hear it and write it into policy. What starts as a jab on live TV becomes a wound on democracy itself. Because what came next wasn't just politics, it was personal. Behind that debate desk, the hero knew it. This wasn't just about countering a bad argument. It was about holding the line against an ideology that wanted to drag America backward. An ideology that thrives on fear, on exclusion, on the illusion that power belongs to the few while the rest should simply be grateful to exist in the shadows. But the villain underestimated one thing: resilience. The kind forged in hardship, the kind that carries the weight of generations who crossed oceans, who faced walls of prejudice, who were told 1,000 times to go back, and still stood tall. The audience didn't know it yet, but this wasn't just going to be a response. It was going to be a reckoning, one that would echo far beyond the walls of that studio, one that would become a rallying cry for everyone who's ever felt erased, diminished, or told to sit down and stay quiet. And just when everyone thought it couldn't get worse, before that moment became the headline, before those words, "Do you even belong here?" exploded across every screen in America, there was a man who believed he was untouchable. A man who had built his empire not on integrity, not on service, but on the raw currency of arrogance. To his followers, he was a truth-teller, someone who said what others were afraid to say. But peel back the curtain and you'd find a career defined by scandal, greed, and a hunger for power that knew no limits. This wasn't his first offense. Far from it. Years ago, when he clawed his way into politics, he didn't do it on the promise of unity or progress. He did it by stoking fear, fear of outsiders, fear of change, fear of anyone who didn't fit the narrow image of what he believed America should look like. He called it preserving tradition. In reality, it was preserving privilege, his privilege. He courted controversy like it was oxygen. Every insult was a headline. Every headline was a fundraising pitch. He mocked the vulnerable, sneered at the marginalized, and turned cruelty into a campaign strategy. And it worked. His followers loved him for it. Because in his world, empathy was weakness and compassion was currency you couldn't cash. Behind closed doors, he was even worse. Stories leaked about backroom deals that lined his pockets, about lobbyists who whispered policy into his ear in exchange for favors. Reports surfaced of luxury trips funded by donations, of charity funds that mysteriously vanished. Each time, he dodged accountability with a smirk and a soundbite, spinning scandal into spectacle until the truth drowned in noise. And yet, for all his bravado, there was something else, a simmering resentment. He hated losing. He hated being challenged. To him, opposition wasn't a difference of opinion. It was an insult to his identity. Every critic became an enemy. Every rival became a target. That's why when he stepped onto that debate stage, he wasn't just debating policies, he was defending his throne. But his hypocrisy, it didn't stop there. He preached law and order while bending the law for his own gain. He thundered about family values while his personal life unraveled in a storm of affairs and payoffs. He painted himself as a patriot, yet his wealth flowed through offshore accounts, safe from the taxes he demanded others pay. And still he stood before America as if ordained by destiny, eyes gleaming with that same smirk that had carried him through every storm. He believed this night would be no different. He believed he could break his opponent with a single question, a question dipped in venom, sharpened to cut through flesh and bone. Do you even belong here? Because that's what he did. He didn't just attack ideas, he attacked existence. And for years, no one had truly stopped him. No one had stripped away the armor of arrogance that shielded him from consequences. But little did they know, the storm was already forming. Long before the bright lights of that debate stage, before the cameras and the headlines, She was just a girl with a dream, and a fire that no hardship could extinguish. Her story didn't begin in marble halls or ivy-covered institutions. It began in a cramped apartment with peeling paint, where the hum of traffic outside the window was a lullaby, and the scent of fried onions in a tiny kitchen meant dinner was ready. Her parents had come to this country with little more than hope and calloused hands. They didn't speak English fluently, but they spoke the language of sacrifice fluently enough for their children to understand. Every day was a battle against bills, against doubt, against a world that often reminded them they didn't quite belong. Yet in that small apartment, they built a fortress of resilience. They told her stories of why they came here, because America was supposed to be a place where dreams didn't have borders, where hard work could carve a future from stone. She believed them. She believed it with the innocence of a child and the determination of someone who had seen struggle up close. She watched her mother work 2 shifts at a factory, fingers raw, yet still smiling as she packed her daughter's lunch. She watched her father swallow his pride as he drove a cab, enduring slurs and sneers from passengers who looked at him like he was invisible. But invisibility was never an option for her. She excelled in school not because it was easy, but because failure was never part of the plan. Every grade, every paper, every late night was another brick in the bridge she was building, not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been told to know their place. College was a battlefield of its own. She faced professors who questioned if she was in the right class, classmates who joked about her name like it was a punchline, but for every sneer she doubled down. For every barrier she built another path. Scholarships came not because someone handed them to her, but because she earned them, every single one. Then came law school, another world, another proving ground, and she didn't just survive, she thrived. Not because she had connections or wealth, but because she had something no privilege could buy, purpose. She knew what it felt like to be overlooked. She knew what it felt like to carry the weight of generations who had dreamed of this moment but never lived to see it. When she entered public service, it wasn't for fame. It wasn't for the spotlight. It was because she understood the stakes. She understood that policies aren't just words on paper, they're lifelines or nooses, depending on who writes them. She vowed that no one would ever feel erased on her watch. But make no mistake, the road was brutal, death threats, smear campaigns, headlines dripping with malice. And through it all, she stayed standing, not because she was unafraid, but because fear had no room in the mission she carried. And here she was now, face to face with a man who represented everything she had fought against her entire life. Entitlement without merit, power without accountability, cruelty without consequence. When he looked at her and asked, "Do you even belong here?" he didn't just question her credentials, he questioned her existence. He questioned the decades of grit and sacrifice that had carried her to that stage. But what he didn't know, what millions were about to see, was that this question wasn't her breaking point. It was her ignition point. Because she wasn't just standing there as a politician. She was standing there as every child who had translated bills for their parents, as every woman who had been told she was too loud, too bold, too much, as every immigrant who had been made to feel like a guest in their own home. And that's why what happened next was nothing short of historic. The air inside the studio was electric, heavy with the kind of tension you could almost taste. The cameras were rolling, their red lights burning like watchful eyes. Microphones captured every breath, every shift in tone as the moderators tried, futilely, to maintain order. But order was never part of the villain's strategy. He leaned forward, elbows on the polished desk, that trademark smirk plastered across his face. He could smell blood in the water. To him, debates weren't about ideas. They were about dominance, and he had mastered the art of turning discourse into a brawl. "You know what the problem is?" he said, voice rising just enough to drown out anyone who dared to interject. "People like you come in here pretending to care about this country while the rest of us, real Americans, carry the weight." Gasps rippled through the audience, a low murmur of disbelief sweeping across the room. He didn't stop. He thrived on that sound, the sound of chaos bending to his will. "You talk about equality," he sneered, waving his hand as if swatting away a fly. "You talk about fairness, but you don't understand this country. You never have. You don't build America by apologizing for it." The moderator tried to interject. "Sir, please." But he cut them off like a blade through paper. No, I'm not finished, because someone needs to say it, and clearly no one else here has the guts." Every interruption was calculated, every insult sharpened for maximum sting. And then came the low blow, the kind of line that makes headlines for all the wrong reasons. "Frankly," he said, leaning back with theatrical ease, "if you hate it so much, why don't you just go back?" A collective gasp. Cameras zoomed in, catching the flicker of anger, shock, and on her face something else. Calm, utter calm. He expected outrage. He wanted fire. He wanted her to snap, to crumble under the weight of his words. Because that's what bullies do. They feed on chaos, on loss of composure. But she didn't give him that, not even close. She sat there, shoulders squared, eyes steady, hands folded on the desk as if carved from stone. Not a muscle flinched. Not a breath wavered. It was the kind of silence that speaks louder than 1,000 words, the kind that makes even the loudest man in the room wonder if he just overplayed his hand. But of course, he didn't notice. He was too busy basking in what he thought was victory. Too busy mistaking noise for power, forgetting that real power doesn't need volume. It needs precision. So he kept going, louder, meaner. "This is why we're losing our country, because we've got people like her sitting here lecturing us, pretending to understand what it means to be American. News flash, you don't. You never will." The audience shifted uncomfortably. Some cheered, some booed. Social media feeds lit up like wildfire, hashtags multiplying by the second. It wasn't just a debate anymore. It was a spectacle, and everyone watching knew something had to give. But not yet, not here, because the storm was still gathering strength and its eye sat calmly at that desk, biding her time. The villain leaned back, satisfied, his voice echoing like a gavel slamming down. He thought he had silenced her. But then silence fell. The hero was about to speak. The air was thick. You could feel the electricity crackling between the two figures, one draped in arrogance, the other cloaked in quiet confidence. Cameras zoomed in, desperate to capture every flicker of emotion. Journalists leaned forward, pens hovering midair. Viewers across the country held their breath, fingers hovering over the screen, waiting to tweet the next big moment. For what felt like an eternity, silence dominated the chamber. The villains sat back, smirking, convinced they had landed the final blow. Their insults still lingered in the air like smoke after a gunshot, personal jabs, twisting of facts, a masterclass in manipulation. It was a performance designed to humiliate, to corner, to make the hero crumble under the weight of manufactured shame. But the hero didn't flinch. Not once. Instead, they leaned slightly forward, hands clasped on the table, eyes steady as a sniper's scope. No anger, no panic, just an unshakable calm that unnerved everyone watching. Because calm in the face of chaos is power. And then the first word left their lips. Soft, controlled, deadly. "Are you done?" 3 words. That was all it took to shatter the illusion of dominance. The villain's smirk faltered for a split second, a micro-expression caught by every camera in the room. And in that brief crack, the hero saw an opening. They continued, voice rising just enough to command attention without screaming. Every syllable was deliberate, every pause a calculated strike. You've spent the last 10 minutes, 10, trying to paint me as a fraud, as someone who doesn't belong here. And while you were busy performing for the cameras, you forgot one thing. The villain shifted in their chair, fingers tightening around their pen. The truth, the hero said, letting the word hang in the air like a sword suspended by a thread. Murmurs rippled through the room. Journalists exchanged glances. The villain swallowed, masking it with a smirk that now looked more like a grimace. The hero leaned closer to the microphone. You talk about integrity while hiding behind half-truths. You preach values you've never lived by. You claim to fight for the people, while cutting deals in back rooms that would make them sick. Boom, the first hit landed. Cameras clicked in rapid fire. Somewhere in the back, a reporter mouthed, "Oh my God." The villain tried to interject, but the hero raised a hand. No, you had your turn. Now it's my turn to remind everyone who you really are. Every word was scalpel sharp, slicing through layers of pretense. They didn't yell. They didn't rant. They didn't lose control. Instead, they dismantled the villain's entire persona with the elegance of a master chess player executing a checkmate. Point by point, they exposed hypocrisy. The luxury vacations funded by taxpayers, the contradictory statements from past interviews, the hidden interests buried in contracts. Each revelation landed like a hammer blow, and with every strike, the villain's mask cracked further. The cameras captured it all. The twitch in the jaw, the beads of sweat forming at the temple, the desperate glance toward aides who could do nothing now. But the hero wasn't done, not yet. They paused, let the tension simmer. And then, with a voice that could cut through steel, they delivered the line that would echo across the internet for weeks. You call this power? No, power is standing in front of the people you serve and telling them the truth even when it scares you. That's what I'm doing right now. What are you doing? The chamber erupted. Gasps, applause, the sound of history being made in real time. Hashtags began to form before the sentence even ended. Truth wins, mic drop moment. The villain tried to speak, but the sound that came out was hollow, words that fell flat in a room no longer theirs. They weren't the predator anymore. They were the prey. The heroes straightened their back, gaze sweeping across the audience, across the cameras, across every single person watching at home. This isn't about me, they said, voice soft but commanding. It's about the people who are tired of being lied to. It's about the dignity we've lost while you played games with their lives. That ends now. And then silence. The kind of silence that isn't empty but deafening, because it's filled with realization. The villain's face told the story. Disbelief, anger, and finally, the crushing weight of defeat. The hero didn't smile. They didn't gloat. They simply gathered their papers, stood up, and walked out, not like someone escaping, but like someone who had just rewritten the ending of the story. The cameras followed, the microphones stretched, but the hero gave them nothing more, because the moment spoke louder than any soundbite ever could. And when the dust settled, the world couldn't stop talking. The mic drop moment didn't just echo in the chamber. It detonated across the globe like a cultural earthquake. Within seconds, phones lit up like Christmas trees. Notifications, tags, shares, every platform went into overdrive. Twitter, no, scratch that X, became a battlefield of words, emojis, and memes. Hashtags like Hero Owns Villain, Speech of the Century, and Mic Drop 2025 began climbing the charts at lightning speed. In under 15 minutes, they weren't just trending, they were the internet. Clips of the moment, that one perfect sentence, that one killer glare, looped endlessly. Slow-motion edits emerged within an hour. Someone added cinematic music. Another synced it to the Thug Life soundtrack. TikTok got its hands on it, and suddenly every other scroll was the hero's face frozen mid-glare, captions reading, "When you end your enemy's career in one sentence." Instagram Reels flooded. YouTube, thumbnails screaming in all caps. Legendary response. Reaction videos popped up like mushrooms after rain, streamers screaming, gasping, replaying that mic drop moment with jaw-dropped thumbnails of their own. And then came the celebrities. First, a cryptic tweet from an A-list actor. "Just saw the clip. Standing ovation in my living room. Fire, 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 respect the GOAT." Within an hour, athletes, musicians, even political commentators joined in. Blue-check chaos, verified approval raining down like confetti. By midnight, the analytics looked like this. 32 million views on the original post. 8 million shares. Hashtag trending one worldwide for 18 hours straight. But the numbers only told half the story. The tone of the internet had shifted. It wasn't just applause, it was vindication. People who had been silent now spoke up. Fans who once doubted started defending. Forums buzzed with one question: where has this person been hiding all this time? The villain, meanwhile, silent. Their last tweet, posted 3 hours earlier, was now a graveyard of ratioed replies. Thousands of comments roasting every syllable. Memes plastered their face with captions like, "When you play chess, but the other guy is the grandmaster." The tide had turned. News anchors couldn't ignore it. Primetime debates rolled clips of the speech like it was the moon landing. Commentators called it the defining moment of this decade's discourse. Entire panels dissected tone, body language, even the pause before that iconic line. One analyst actually brought out a telestrator like it was sports replay. "See this right here, the half smile before they spoke, that's confidence under fire." Podcasts dedicated entire episodes. Talk shows booked experts to explain why the hero's delivery felt like a cultural reset. Think pieces flooded Medium. What we can learn from the mic drop heard around the world. LinkedIn professionals even spun it into corporate wisdom posts. Leadership under pressure, 5 lessons from today's viral debate. And through it all, the hero, silent, not a single word online, no posts, no tweets, no press statements, which only made the frenzy wilder. People craved more, refreshing timelines like addicts waiting for another hit. The silence became its own statement, a masterstroke of restraint. Because the world didn't need the hero to speak, the internet was already speaking for them. Fan edits turned the hero into an icon. Wallpapers, merch mock-ups. Some kid even launched a GoFundMe for a bronze statue, and it was gaining traction. But beyond the noise, beyond the memes and viral clips, something deeper stirred. This wasn't just entertainment. It wasn't just a trending moment. For millions watching, this felt like justice, like the universe finally tilting back into balance, even if only for a heartbeat. People shared personal stories under the hashtag. This made me believe in speaking up again. I've been scared to call out my boss, but this gave me courage. It wasn't just a clapback anymore. It was a cultural spark, a rallying cry disguised as a debate. And somewhere in the quiet corners of that storm, a question began to take shape, a question no one had asked before. But beyond the memes, something deeper was happening. The dust had settled, but the echoes of that moment were still rippling through every corner of the world. People weren't just talking about the words. They were talking about what those words represented. Because, let's be honest, this wasn't just a mic drop. This was a manifesto, a declaration that truth will always outshine deceit, no matter how much noise tries to bury it. And here's the part that hit the hardest. Everyone watching felt it wasn't just her fight, it was their fight too. For every student silenced by a teacher who said, "You're overreacting." For every employee who swallowed their pride because they couldn't afford to lose a paycheck. For every person who ever walked away thinking, "I should have said something." This moment was their redemption. The power of speaking up. What she proved is something we forget in the chaos of likes, shares, and trending sound bites. Courage isn't loud, but when it speaks, the world listens. The villain thought power came from intimidation, but real power is the quiet strength to stand in the storm and say, "Enough." It's not about shouting the loudest. It's about being the calm in the hurricane, the voice that cuts through the static. Because truth doesn't need a megaphone, it needs conviction. Hate is loud, but it's not stronger. The other lesson: hate will always try to dominate the conversation. It's sharp, it's quick. It feels like it's winning because it echoes in every headline, but this moment was proof. Hate is fragile, it cracks under the weight of dignity. The hero didn't clap back with insults. She didn't stoop to the villain's level. She didn't turn the courtroom or the stage into a screaming match. She rose above. And that rise, that's what people remembered. Because here's the truth. Anyone can throw shade, but only legends bring light. From viral moment to timeless lesson. We live in a world obsessed with the next big thing. A trending hashtag today is forgotten tomorrow, but not this. This wasn't a trend, it was a turning point. Why? Because it tapped into something ancient, something universal. The eternal battle between truth and lies, dignity and hate, courage and fear. When she stood up, it wasn't about proving someone wrong. It was about proving that doing the right thing still matters. That integrity isn't outdated. That being decent isn't weakness, it's strength. And the internet didn't just watch, it felt that. Deep down, every person scrolling at 2 a.m., every kid in a classroom, every woman in a boardroom, they all thought the same thing. If she can do it, maybe I can too. Why? It will be remembered for generations. History doesn't remember the noise, it remembers the notes that change the melody. And this was a note so sharp, so clear, it rewrote the entire song. Generations from now, people won't just remember the words. They'll remember the silence before them, the breath the world held, and the way those words cracked the walls of arrogance and fear. Because every era has its battles, and every battle has that one moment where someone says, "No more." This was that moment. And here's why it matters. It showed us that truth doesn't just win, it heals. It restores faith in a world drowning in cynicism. It reminds us that even in the digital age of filters and fake headlines, authenticity still cuts through. And that, my friends, was more than just a debate, it was a defining moment. A moment that proved one simple truth. When you stand for what's right, the world stands with you. Think about it. This wasn't just about a question or an answer. It was about courage versus fear, honesty versus deception, and resilience versus ridicule. And guess what? Courage won, truth won, we all won. But here's the thing, this story doesn't end here. Because the fight for truth, for dignity, for respect, it's not just theirs, it's ours. Every single time we stay silent, we give hate a microphone. But when we speak up, When we share voices like this, we build a world where fairness isn't a trend, it's a standard. So here's your move. Subscribe if you believe in standing tall when it counts. Share this video so the world knows what courage looks like in real time. Drop a comment telling us your favorite moment, because your voice matters. This isn't just content, it's a community, a movement, a family that believes in truth, justice, and never backing down from what's right. And trust me, this is just the beginning, because next time, oh, you're going to want front row seats. Until then, keep questioning, keep fighting, and most importantly, keep believing. Because moments like this, they're not rare, they're reminders. Reminders that no matter how loud the noise gets, the truth will always speak louder. Subscribe now. Share this with someone who needs hope today. And let's make sure this moment isn't forgotten, because the world needs more of them.